football Jets. And the New Orleans Saints are on his wish list. Of course, he's played with both Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr. Major League Baseball wild card action. The Tigers lead the Astros 1-0, top of the sixth, 2 outs there. And, oh, by the way, the Jazz opened up training camp yesterday. So it is that time of year where we have a little bit of everything to talk about today, including UFC. That's right. We're going to do a little UFC on the show today with a really good guest list on this Wednesday afternoon. We will start things off today with Court McGee, who has joined the show before. Court is a UFC MMA fighter. We'll talk about the upcoming event Saturday nights. Court will stop by right out of the gates today. Chris Kamrani, typically a Friday guest of ours. See if CK does a bit of a victory lap today. He essentially warned us about Utah, Arizona on Saturday night when he joined us on Friday of last week. So we'll bring in CK today on a Wednesday. Triumphant return of Neil Smith to the program, the former general manager of the New York Rangers who won a Stanley Cup, is going to be our guest weekly throughout the hockey season to talk Utah Hockey Club. Neil stops by today. Andy Larson on the day after the Jazz have opened training camp is also going to roll by. So Court McGee, Chris Camarati, Neil Smith, Andy Larson, me, Spence Checketts, all of you the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, on a Wednesday afternoon. So what are you going to do on Saturday when the UFC is going on and there's college football? I guess there's no Utah or BYU, but this weekend is kind of like right down your alley.
Yeah, I'm going to be at the UFC event. I'm going to be there live.
All right, so we'll bring in Court McGee coming up to do a little UFC on the program today. Then going to move over to Chris Camarati, Neil Smith, Andy Larson, and we'll go from there. Hope you're having a great Wednesday, a great work week. And prior to Court joining us on this Wednesday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends too, it's Standard Restaurant Supply. Standard Restaurant Supply is your tailgate headquarters. Get everything you need to make your tailgate epic. Standard carries everything from serving dishes, chafing dishes, propane, portable barbecues, and much more. Check them out at 3500 Southwest Temple and online at standardrestaurant.com on a Wednesday afternoon. It is time now for your opening tip. So we have officially turned our calendars to October. As fall has descended upon us, the weather is beautiful. It's such a great time of year. And if you've listened to the show for a long time, first of all, thank you. Hello, how are you? Second of all, you know that when we turn our calendars to October from September, we like to do a little bit of a what have we learned so far in the first month of college football. Surprises, disappointments, and such. And we'll attack this from a local angle, then expand it out a little bit to the national stuff, as both BYU and Utah are on byes this week, but we have a really good slate of college football coming up, and a lot of teams still in this area of trying to understand who they are, which makes it difficult at times to really predict the landscape. Now, I think it's safe to say the most pleasant surprise, not just here in state, but across the landscape of college football, is BYU heading into their bye week at 5-0. With a win at home against K-State where they throttled them, and then a win on the road against Baylor where they just held on but got it done. They now have 3 road wins. They have 3 P4 wins. They have 2 conference wins, and they're undefeated in both their regular season schedule and conference schedule heading in to Arizona coming up on the 12th at 2 o'clock p.m. down in Provo at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. And ultimately, as we talked about last year, it was really weird to watch a BYU football team coached by Kalani Sitake and having their defensive coordinator be Jay Hill just be a sieve on defense. They were one of the worst teams in the entire country last year at attacking the quarterback, getting to the quarterback, sacking the quarterback, putting pressure on the quarterback. And they're essentially top 20 in most every defensive metric you care about. They're one of the best pass efficiency teams in the country. They already have 10 sacks, I think. They had 11 sacks all of last year. It very much looks like a defense whose head coach is Kalani and whose defensive coordinator is Jay. So year 2 under Jay Hill. And, you know, the funny thing is they did not, whether this was intentional or whether or not they don't have the NIL stuff as dialed in as they need to, they did not hit the transfer portal to get a ton of reinforcements on the defensive side of the football. A few here or there, but not many. It's essentially the same group from a year ago. Got some return missionaries home, but it's more continuity, more familiarity, and more understanding of what their defensive coordinator is asking of them. Now, I think the offense still has some questions. And, it's funny, a lot of the attention up here is on the situation with Cam Rising and the dissemination of information, or the lack of dissemination of information from the football program regarding their starting in Cameron Rising. Kalani's kind of doing the same thing with the running back room as L.J. Martin continues to be sidelined. They got Hinckley Rapati back last week. He did not do much. Their running back room continues to be banged up. But I think it's safe to say that Jake Retzlaff is starting to settle in a little bit, juxtaposed to what we saw last year. And honestly, the start of the season where there were just way too many mistakes, fumbles, turnovers, bad decisions. But it appears that Jake has really settled in. Of course, the conversation preseason was it Retzlaff, was it Bohannon? It's Jake's job now. And at 5-0, I think he solidified his spot as QB1. Chase Roberts has kind of turned into a little bit of a Brant Keithy type down there. They're using Chase all over the place, and he has been absolutely phenomenal. 20 catches, 334, an average of almost 17 yards a catch, 1 touchdown reception, but they're also using him a bit out of the backfield where he has a rushing touchdown. And they're utilizing him everywhere. They're moving him all over the place. They're linebackers: Harrison Taggart, Jack Kelly, Isaiah Glasker. These kids fly all over the field. And Jack Kelly has 3 sacks, 19 tackles, and their leading tackler, Harrison Taggart, has 25 tackles. Tyler Batty, of course, Tyler Batty's an NFL guy. Had him on the show during Big 12 Media Day. Nothing but respect and nothing but admiration for what Brigham Young has done through 5 games. Now, on the Utah side of things, I don't know if we can accurately analyze who the team is. And yes, I know that you're going to harken a little bit back to last year. I know that we're all going through the PTSD thing where it was the same thing last year with the injuries, with the lack of information, who's the quarterback, what's going on with Krene, what's going on with Connor. And 4-1 right now, coming off a loss with Arizona, hitting the bye week. Coach Witt addressed the media yesterday and said right now is the perfect time for a bye week so they can get healthy. Obviously, you want to go into that bye week with a win so you don't have that bad taste in your mouth. But maybe, and Kyle talked about this yesterday, if you're looking for sound from practice, ESPN700sports.com is where you go. They're doing more live tackling this week than they typically do this far into the season because of how bad their tackling was against Arizona. The Arizona game was so weird for so many reasons, as we've talked about. Arizona gets trounced by K-State, but they got bullied by K-State. And Kyle talked about this yesterday. In the trenches is where Arizona beat Utah. That doesn't happen often. And if it does happen, it's usually against a team that is known more for their physicality and their ability to bring it in a way that Arizona just does not have as far as their reputation goes. So everything is still on the table for Utah. I think a lot of us are already looking ahead to November the 9th with BYU's hot start. And if Utah can get right against Arizona State, I don't really sweat that TCU game. Then they're on the road against Houston. Utah should be 7-1 on November the 9th. And for BYU's side of things, if they can handle Arizona, they get OK State at home. And OK State is not near. They're probably the most disappointing team in the Big 12. They're not near what everybody thought that they would be, and they cannot run the football. Ollie Gordon is averaging 67 yards per game. And with that BYU defensive front, I'm now starting to think that there's a good chance home against Arizona, home against OK State, on the road against UCF, who just got trounced by Colorado. There's a good chance November the 9th, BYU's in Salt Lake City as a 7-0 football team, 8-0 football team, potentially 5-0 in conference play, and Utah could be 7-1 and potentially 3-1 in conference play if everything goes right. So, I don't think it's been, I could be wrong. I'm sure fans are going to disagree. I don't think it's been a disappointing Utah football season so far when it comes to the results and when it comes to what's still on the table. I think the disappointing part of it is that analyzing the team prior to the season, we all kind of said the same thing. And okay, if Cameron's under center, then they've got a shot to beat anybody. And if he's not, I guess we'll kind of see what sort of hand we've been dealt. For the second straight year, we're simply dealing with an incomplete situation with Utah football right now. But, of course, everything's still on the table for the Utes, and BYU off to a fantastic start to this college football season. I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you do is pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Side note, legal in Utah, so don't sweat that. Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts, such as Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. It's the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. All right, here's what you do. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. Get that $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup with our good friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, we're back to football in a little bit with Chris Camerani, but the UFC, big event Saturday night. Court McGee is our guest coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Chris Comradi's going to roll by today, typically a Friday staple on the show to talk college football, our buddy from The Athletic. Neil Smith, former general manager of the New York Rangers, high-level scout for a bunch of different teams, Stanley Cup winner, will join the show to talk Utah Hockey Club, the Jazz Open Training Camp 2. Andy Larson is our guest. And, oh, by the way, the UFC is in town, UFC 307, Saturday night here in Salt Lake City. Good friend of the show, Court McGee, back on the drive on a Wednesday. Court, happy Wednesday, buddy. How we doing?
Fantastic. Ready to rock and roll.
Yes, sir. Appreciate your time today. So tell us about this matchup you have coming up. It's here in town, and as the pride of O-Town, Court, I imagine you're going to have a jam-packed gallery with friends and family. Tell us about this matchup coming up with Tim Means.
It's going to be a great matchup. We're both grizzled veterans. We haven't fought each other, but we've almost fought several times. Kind of been on the radar for about 10 years. I think he's been in the UFC since 2012, so he's got a ton of experience, and it's a great matchup. Great matchup for the fans. And I'm feeling confident, feeling great, and ready to rock and roll.
So what sort of added motivation is it when Ogden's own Court McGee is fighting in his home state?
Oh, extra motivation. I mean, it's fighting at home, and I don't get to do this very often. It's 2016 was the last one, and then before that, I had several fights outside of the UFC on local venues and local shows. But outside of that, man, it's like, I'm me and Mitch Ramirez now, but for the last 7 or 8 years, it's just been me in the UFC representing Utah. So, it's a privilege to fight here in front of my fans. So I'm like super excited.
How many people, Court? How many Court McGee fans will be in the building on Saturday night?
Oh, I don't even know. I can tell you in 2016, like between 3,000 and 4,000 people left after I fought.
Oh, wow.
It was wild. I was talking to one of the production managers here, and she does all media, and all the media left after I got done fighting, and she was like, the media was like, hey guys, where are you guys? There's still a main card. Like they put me on a televised main card at the time, which they probably should have went a little further up on the card at the time, but it's different now. So yeah, I'll be starting off the card. I'll be the very first fight on the card. So starting Utah off on the right foot.
So get there early to see our guy Court. Court, I wonder because I'm an old guy, and so I date back to the early days. Jeremy Horn. I had some friends that would train with Jeremy, and they were way into the UFC, and so I would go to events. I would watch the events, and I always wondered if the fighting community, the MMA community, would ever really embrace what I perceive to be kind of an underrated, fight community out here in Utah. Does it feel like the secret's out and people understand how healthy the MMA community is here in the state of Utah?
It is. It took some time. I think it comes with the humility. I think there's a lot of religion. I think there's a lot of humility. And so we have a ton of star athletes, but I don't think we have that. It's not like Pittsburgh. It's not like, we're not known as the fight community. But we have depth. I mean, from boxing to jiu-jitsu. I mean, we had jiu-jitsu in Utah, outside of like Southern California in Utah before it was anywhere else in the United States with Pedro Sauer in Provo, Utah in the late 80s. So, I mean, we have a depth and we have a big community. We have a ton of local athletes that are ready to make that jump to the UFC, to Bellator, to the PFL. We have quite a few fighting in those different organizations. Mitch Ramirez is now had his Contender Series win, and he's in the UFC now, so we'll be seeing him pretty soon. But I think now it's like they had two like just sold out gnarly fight cards. The last two fights the UFC had here, and they love it. The community comes out and supports. I mean, it's packed. It's been packed from the very first to the last fight. So I don't know. It's pretty exciting, and we have an incredible fight community. So
I know you don't give a rip about this, but I will ask you why you believe Tim Means has been installed by Vegas as the pretty heavy favorite to beat you coming up on Saturday. Give me your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think a lot of times they base that off of your last couple of fights, or like it goes to stats or whatever. On the stats, I know we're pretty even. We've had about the same amount of fights. I think this is my 27th fight since the Ultimate Fighter. So that's the 4 fights in the Ultimate Fighter house. So, I mean, I kind of see it being a little more even. But if they give it a favorite, it's like I had two pretty quick stoppages, and I had a severe neck injury that I was dealing with for several years, and I got it fixed. And, so they base it off of your last couple of fights. My last fight was a great fight. It was really close against another great veteran. I felt better than I thought I was going to feel. And so I renegotiated, and I feel better than I've felt in several years. So it's exciting. Stat-wise, that's okay. Like, it doesn't matter. I could care less what people think or what stats. I know what I'm going to go out and do. I know what I've prepared for. I've probably put 12 or 13,000 hours of preparation time on a mat all over the country. I've got 4 or 5 hours in the UFC octagon. I'm confident in my ability to find a way to beat Tim Means on Saturday.
Tell me about what kind of fighter he is. What I have in front of me as far as the next fight, ultimately trying to preview this, they list him as a striker. He is bigger than you as far as his height. He's 6'2". So tell me what sort of fighter he is and what you have to do to combat what he does well.
He's a striker. He throws lots of left high kicks and left front kicks. He's got a great straight left. So I have to, win the foot battle, staying to the left, just outside of his right lead foot. I need to be fast. I need to be all the way in, all the way out, and just stick to the game plan. And if I get it down, find a way to finish him.
So how much of your preparation, we have a lot of listeners that love football, a lot of listeners that love basketball. And, when you prep for an opponent in sports, you watch a lot of tape. How much of your preparation for Tim are you digging into past fights and you're watching tape to see what his tendencies are?
So this is where I'm not typical. I don't watch any footage on any of the opponents ever. I like to practice in the gym, and then it's my opportunity to figure out how to beat them on that stage. That's the elusive part to me. Some people are like, oh, that's not very smart. But my coaches watch footage. They give me direction. That way I'm focused on what I need to do rather than what he does well. So when I go out there, this is what I need to do. I stick to my game plan. That's what's in my head. That's the action I need to put in play. And I think I feel better about that. Going into it, I feel better about that. As far as preparation goes, though, I've fought between 9 and 10 southpaws. He's a southpaw, so he fights left hand. And I'm confident in my ability to work with that, to strike with that, to grapple with his level, to wrestle. And so I'm real excited.
Just out of curiosity, let me follow up. Is this a superstition thing where you don't watch tape? Like, ultimately, why is it, Court, that you don't want to study tape of your opponent prior to a fight?
So I did one time. I was in title contention at middleweight, and it was in 2012. And I watched footage of this guy. You would throw a lazy jab, and he would come over top of it with the right hand. And he was a former professional boxer. He had lightning in his hands. I mean, it was in title contention. It was one fight away. So I would have fought Luke Rockhold for the interim UFC title, and then fought Anderson Silva for the title. So I was one fight away, and I watched footage of that right hand coming, and that's all I thought about. And so I get into this fight, fly all the way to Australia. Like I get out there, and I was thinking in my head, like, okay, I got to make sure to not come for this right hand, and it's like my whole focus was on that right hand. And eventually that right hand came. Even though I had a fast jab, he had great timing, and he landed. And to my amazement, I was still standing there. And I ended up losing the first round, and I thought, what am I doing? I need to start pushing the pressure. I need to start. And so I came back, second round was really close. Third round, well, with the rules we have now, it probably would have been a 10-8 round and ended in a draw. But it ended up in a decision loss. But I remember that vividly, man, I need to focus on what I need to do, because my ability to strike with a striker, to wrestle with a wrestler, to grapple with a grappler, and to compete and mix all those things together is pretty high level. So I feel confident everywhere. So it's let's structure a game plan that will give me the best advantage to win this specific opponent. And then when I'm not training for a fight, I still practice 6 to 7 times a week, sometimes even more, and hone my skills and get better and help my students get better and help my athletes who compete in MMA get better. It's maybe not necessarily superstition, but I noticed that I had an issue with it, and so I made those changes. I trust my coaches, the people that I surround myself with, and they structure a game plan. Okay, let's drill this, let's do this, let's focus a little more on this instead of this, and I stick to that. It's like I had 71 or 72 practices leading up to this fight. Every one of those practices is pretty specific. Some weeks it's 9 practices, some weeks it's 13 practices. We peak, get our weight to where we need it so we can cut, because I cut down to 171. And, that way it's structured. I know exactly what I need to do and where I need to be. And then the night of the fight, that's where the artwork happens. That's where I get to go out, and I have earned the right to go out there and find a way to beat the opponent, which is Tim Means this week. So it's one of those things, and I'm passionate about it. I love the preparation. I love being in the fight. And I'm excited to do it in my home state. This will be my 27th time fighting with the 4 fights in the house, and everyone is a unique experience. But I vividly remember walking out in 2016 when I fought Dominic Steele here for the first UFC card they had. And, it's just there's a little bit more pep in my step when you're in the home crowd. So pretty exciting stuff, man.
And I can hear the juice in your voice, Cord. I wonder, and I'm not bringing this up in a disparaging way because I'm a lot older than you are, but you are 39.
Yep.
And I wonder if you have an idea in your mind of how you'd like to go out, how much longer you want to do this.
For the last 5 years, have taken it one fight at a time. So I know I get the 4-fight deals, but I take them one at a time. So I check with my family, I check with my wife, I check with my sons, my training partners, my coaches, people that I trust. I have long-term relationships with a lot of these coaches that have coached me over the years. I stay in great shape. I work with a company called Athlete Care, and, it's I do my maintenance, and I follow post-fight protocols to make sure my noodle's safe. So I stay really healthy, and I feel as good as I've ever felt, outside of when I had my neck injury going into the Matt Brown fight. So, I don't want to put a stop on it, but, it's you're always one injury or one fight away from not being able to compete again. So for me, it's I take it one fight at a time. This is the next fight. This is the most important. So, I don't want to look at hanging it up, or I can look at hey, this might be the last fight. Go out on that sword. So that's where I'm at with it.
Love it, man. Hey, before I set you loose, obviously with the local interest and you being right out of the gates, we'll have a lot of Court McGee fans, and you're our guy, having joined our show multiple times over the years. Give us a little preview of the other cards, the main card. Let's get that building packed. And I would imagine outside of being a fighter, you're also a fan of these other fighters, and you'll be wanting to see them perform. So what are some dynamics of the main draws here that you like people to know, of course, outside of your fight, our local boy, who we'll all be pulling for?
Well, the very second fight is Carla Esparza. She's having her retirement fight. Former Ultimate Fighter champion, former UFC champion. She's the second fight. And I'm telling you, like, St. Prude and Spann, Thompson and Buckley is going to be lightning. I mean, the whole card is just stacked with great fights. Yeah, you have 2 title fights, Pennington and Pena. I mean, that's going to be a great fight. And then, of course, your main event, Pereira and Khalil. So, I mean, dude, the whole card is going to be exciting. So,
who do you like in the main event, Court? Who are you picking and why?
I don't have a pick.
All right.
I always root for underdogs, but dude, I'm a huge Pereira fan. Glover Teixeira, my teammate, is his coach and his corner. You know, I'm a pick guy. John Hackelman was my coach on the Ultimate Fighter House, and I was around before Glover left and when he came back. You know, so it's like I root for my teammates and friends, but Khalil Roundtree has an excellent story. You know, overcoming the weight issues, changing his life, coming into the UFC with just like 4 or 5 fights, and then having a few ups and downs and battling through that, coming and making his way all the way to a title shot. Like, how do you not root for a guy like that? So it's just, you know, I think it's going to be fireworks. It's more exciting. I don't necessarily have a pick. I'm not a big pick guy, but there is a whole card full from start to finish of excellent fights. So I'm just grateful they gave me a shot to fight here at least one more time.
Good stuff, Court. Thanks for the time, man. We're always pulling for you, so go get him, and as always, stay healthy, okay?
Okay. Hey, thanks, buddy.
All right, Court McGee. Ogden's own Court McGee, fighting out of Provo now, will be in action UFC 307 coming up Saturday night at the Delta Center. And Porter will be there live, I believe. Are you ready to participate in this radio show on live air?
I fixed my microphone.
Hey, guy.
Imagine that.
Are you concerned about the Anaconda choke coming up this weekend?
The Anaconda choke.
I'm a big fan of the Go-Go Plata, but I don't want to get too deep with you because I
Mm-hmm.
just want to make sure you're prepared for the fight on Saturday.
I'm prepared and excited for it. Obviously, Court, a local guy, a hometown guy that we've gotten to know well, and another really good card. UFC 307, a title fight. Alex Pereira is one of the more interesting fighters in the world right now. He's kind of merging between weight classes and dominating wherever he goes, which is really, really hard to do in the sport. And looking very much forward to it, and I'll be there. Of course, keeping a side eye on college football action on a Saturday.
I hope Court pulls a Peruvian necktie.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about I feel like he's going to go in there striking, but Court's a good wrestler. He may have to.
Yeah, and, watch out for Tim's rubber guard. I'd, throw that out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, before we catch a break, shout out to Court. Good dude, man. He joined us live in studio a couple years back. I want to tell you about my friends at Advanced Window Products. The sales and installation are all in-house. This is Nate Orchard. This is Jake Weber. These are 2 local guys, and they're just awesome. The families are just great, and obviously you guys know Nate from his time at the University of Utah, and Jake and his family have been doing this thing for a long time. It's a local business with local residents taking care of local people. It's at Advanced Window Products. Build, install, guarantee for life. Bottom line is this. If you need new windows, there's nowhere else to go, and you should call today. It's 801-850-9100. But they're doing a football special this week only where you get $2,500 off when you purchase 10 windows or more. So let's say you're anticipating moving in a month or 2. Call today, get on the schedule, and just lock in the savings. So if you're going to need windows or if you need windows now, today's the day to call 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or online at advancedwindows.com. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. College football coming up next with Chris Comrani right here on ESPN 700. There are so many great Billy Joel songs to choose from. I don't know why we have to do, the Horatio Sands cover band. We strictly do 80s Joel music, sir. Is this Kamrani's selection? Is that what this is?
Yeah, this was a request. This was a request. I heard from you when I played a Billy Joel song that it wasn't the right one. So we'll have to defer to you on which Billy Joel ones to get to.
Old school.
Okay.
Old school. That's why the Horatio Sands cover band in Step Brothers was so funny, because he was mocking the fact that Billy Joel started making really bad music later on.
Ah, okay.
Chris Kamrani, we strictly do 80s. Is this, are you mocking Billy Joel with this selection, or do you genuinely like that song?
You know the answer, Spence. And I'm going to fact check you. Single by Billy Joel from the album Glass Houses, You May Be Right, released March 7th, 1980.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. Strictly do 80s Joel music. That's why I love that scene in Step Brothers. Horatio Sands underrated. Is that fair to say?
In the pantheon of the Will Ferrell era of SNL, I'd say Horatio Sands was a necessary role player. It's not the most elite era of SNL, in my opinion, but it's a close second. Horatio has some very, very good cameos in movies over the years, and was a good role player on SNL back in the day. So I agree with you there too.
Horatio Sands as Ned Grabavoy. Does that work?
Oh, jeez. Oh, this is how we're starting? Okay. I say no, but I like where your head's at. I don't know if he could be a shuttler in Jason's 4-4-2 diamond. I don't know if Horatio has the pipes to be able to handle that type of energy in a game.
No, I'm quite sure he couldn't literally play midfield.
I know.
I'd like to see that, though.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd watch it.
My goodness. Where to start today? Well, the Black Desert Championship is rolling to Black Desert Resort. PGA Tour returning to Utah for the first time in 6 years. CK, who do you like?
Bruce Summerhays.
All right. Well, at least you knew a name of a golfer. I didn't think you'd even know a name. All right, Chris. Would you like to take a victory lap? You kind of told us on Friday exactly what to expect on Saturday night.
I don't want to take a victory lap. I just think that if you are somebody who understands how college football works, you're going to have a true freshman playing and starting a quarterback. Odds are he's going to have a rough game or two or three if he starts an entire season. And Isaac wasn't, blowing the doors off anybody the first few weeks, but Arizona was not the get-right game for Utah. It turns out it was vice versa, and they just outplayed them from the jump. And the game's not all on Isaac. It's not even like close to that. I think you could make an argument that Utah's defense was extremely porous. They got blown off the ball. They think they gave up like 7 yards per carry against a team that likes to throw it. And questions abound regarding this team, even though they're 4-1 and they're ranked 18th in the country. We do not know who this team is, and we may not know for a while.
No, we don't. I started the show off with that little lesson learned from the month of September. Now that we've turned our calendars to October, you know what struck me, Chris? And I was there. I brought my son, and it was fun to be there in the stadium with him. He's living back east now, so there's a little nostalgia. But watching K-State just dump truck Arizona physically just gave me tremendous confidence that Utah would be able to do the same. And Kyle talked about this yesterday. Coach Witt essentially said we lost in the trenches, which Utah rarely does. And if they do, it's not to a team like that. What do you attribute that to?
I'm going to go out on a limb and piss people off and say that Utah is basically back in the Pac-12, man. You are in a conference now where anybody can beat anybody on any given day. Nobody's very good. There are good teams, but no great teams. And I think we have to ditch the notion that, Utah's physical presence is going to show up every single week the same way people presume that Arizona's offense was going to show up every week. It did in that K-State, but it did against Utah. Utah finds itself back in the Pac-12, man. That's all it is. Like, you talk about like 6 to 7 teams that can win the conference near the midway point of the season. That sounds like the Pac-12 to me. So what do I attribute Utah getting manhandled to? I don't know if they had too much juice going into this game, if they were too pissed off about last year's loss in Tucson. It just seemed like from the start, Arizona, and it's a very big cliche on my part. And my whole job is to avoid cliches, but it seemed like Arizona wanted it more and they were better prepared. And when you have those two things, you're generally going to win games.
Yeah, yeah. And, I was somewhat taken back at the environment and the atmosphere. And this has been misconstrued as me taking shots at fans. I'm not, because the fans will follow the lead of the football. And if the football is really good, the fans typically follow suit. It's hard to just get excited when there's not a lot to get excited about. I mean, the moment of loudness was a moment of just some noise, which you
Mm-hmm.
don't really ever hear. I don't know that I can recall a night as odd as that when it came to the lack of energy in the stadium.
Well, I wasn't there, but Utah has a history of laying some eggs in some conceived, big time games. I know I'll bring up the game that shall not be named, but the TCU game back in 2009 or 10 is the one that fans still try to forget and will always try to forget. But there are some stinkers over the years, man. It happens. I get it, but um, hindsight is 2020. I understand that Kyle is always going to want to go for the jugular. I guess in retrospect, does it make sense to give your true freshman quarterback 6 points on the board immediately and some breathing room and some comfort as opposed to back-to-back red zone trips that end in nothing? I know, story as old as time. Fans frustrated with Andy Ludwig and his play calling. They were mad at Andy when he called a perfect season, Spence. So we'll just let that sink in for a second. But I get it. Fans are frustrated. I think they drank the Kool-Aid that Utah was going to come into the Big 12 and run riot. I didn't, because I just don't think this team is as good as everybody thought it could be. And when you don't have your most important offensive player, yeah, that's going to show its head. It's going to show its head every once in a while, and it did against Arizona.
Can this team be as good as everybody thought that they were going to be? Or is this just another lesson learned that maybe we should pump the brakes on these audacious expectations every single year?
I think we should pump the brakes. I think we should pump the brakes. I understand that Utah deserves to be in the conversation, but until they do it, unfortunately for Utah, they won a Pac-12 title in years where the playoff was 4 teams and not 12. That's an unfortunate reality for them. But if you really paid attention to Utah's roster, you knew that there were some pretty glaring flaws. I mean, we're talking about the health of Cam Rising. We talked about it before the season. If Cam gets hurt, can his backup step in and keep the ship moving forward? Yeah, Isaac's done well, but he's still a true freshman, and he's not this team isn't good enough, Spence, that even though a true freshman's going to come in, they're still going to manhandle other teams because the rest of the roster is so stacked. That's not the case. It's just not. And you talk about losing some key players to injuries. We talked about Cam, but you're missing guys like Connor O'Toole. You're missing Karene Reed. You're missing Kenan Johnson, guys who were starters to coming out of training camp. And I just don't think this roster is to the point where some fans and some local media members think it's, on par with the Georgias and the Alabamas and the Ohio States. It's just not. All you have to do is win your conference and you're in. I get that. It's a new reality, and it's a great reality for Utah and other folks in the Big 12. But the truth is this team still has some areas that it needs to sorely improve upon. And it's not a bad thing. It's just a reality. Again, we have to exist in reality. And the reality is Utah's not Georgia, Bama, or Ohio State, or whomever yet. They're not. And they may never be. And that's okay. But I would caution people, as I have again and again, to just not necessarily lean in too far and let the games play out. And so far, 4-1. Cam's missed basically 3 games, and you're ranked number 18th in the country, and you have everything to still play for. But this is a long season, and as evidenced by the Big 12 season so far, anybody can beat anybody, which is kind of like the existence that Utah had the previous 11 years.
So let's stay in this space for a minute, because I talk about this with college football every year. College football, unlike the NFL, has this brand bias where certain teams just get the benefit of the doubt regardless of who they're bringing back. And the 2 examples I always point to are Notre Dame and USC. And certainly Notre Dame and USC have earned the benefit of the doubt based off their historical pedigree. But in the modern day and age of college football, it oftentimes seems like everyone assumes those two are awesome, and more often than not, they're just not. Sometimes they're really good. It's been a long, long time since USC was back at the top when Pete Carroll was there and started off really, really good this year. They go to the Big House, they get smoked. Notre Dame has been fine, but in the NFL, you analyze a team based off the personnel. You don't just assume that the Cowboys are going to be good because they're the biggest brand in the NFL. So how much benefit of the doubt has Kyle earned? How much benefit of the doubt has Utah earned? Because Bama's earned it, Georgia's earned it, looks like Texas has earned it, but Utah, to your point, isn't those guys. And watching Georgia-Bama last week, I'm like, yeah, the gap between those schools and Utah and everybody else, it just is what it is, to your point. But as far as the benefit of the doubt brands, what is Utah football in that conversation?
Oh, it's near the top, and it probably should be, but everybody's going to probably going to be mad at me saying I'm a hater or whatever. It's like the years Utah won the Pac-12, Spence, they were 9-3 in the regular season. Like, that's just the reality. They weren't 11-1, they weren't 12-0. Like, Utah has been good, and it's okay to say that they won the games necessary to get them to 2 Pac-12 titles and 2 Rose Bowls as they have in the last few years. But we cannot operate in the same realm that the roster is as deep as the current cream of the crop. It's just not. And I would hope to think that some Utah fans agree with me. And who knows, man? I'm not saying that would potentially negate a hell of a playoff game against Utah and Texas or whomever if they get in, because when a one-off, anything can happen. We've seen it with Utah twice over the years in bowl games or whatever. Everybody's going to point to the Alabama game, and that was awesome. It's a seminal moment in the program's history. But truth is talent usually wins out. I want you to have, this is a tangent, I want you to have my former colleague Ari Wasserman on your show.
Love to.
He now works for On3. He's one of the few smart football guys that likes me, and I don't know why. He's a great person, a great friend. But his whole thing, his shtick has been college football as a whole will be diluted because of the 12-team playoff, because you're going to be letting in quote unquote not great teams to play for national titles now that the college playoff has expanded. I don't agree with him, but I think there's a case to be made. When you look at the landscape of college football, you're going to have a lot of 9-3. I don't know if there's going to be 8-4 teams that are going to be vying for a national title. So this is a long, rambling, tangential way of saying it's okay to live in one world where Utah is the team that gets the benefit of the doubt because of its prowess on a year-to-year basis. They're always going to be good. They're always going to have a shot in every single game. And that means you built a good program. So Kyle has built carte blanche in a sense locally and nationally, but it's not going to automatically catapult you to national title contention, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's interesting. Josh Pate, who I really like, jumps on the show. He's kind of this rising college football media star. He agrees with Wasserman. It's the same take that he has. I wonder, though, if we play the tape forward, because ultimately, in order for, and we'll just use the teams we're talking about now, in order for the Utahs and the BYUs and the K-States or whatever, the Big 12, I would say the ACC, but Clemson's won national championships. Florida State's not good this year. But, in order for Utah, we'll just use this, the example we're already talking about. In order for Utah to bridge the gap between who they are now and who Alabama is and who Georgia is and who Texas is or Oregon or whatever, it's going to have to be a pro model where there's a salary cap and collectively bargained agreements between teams and players in order to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. Is there space in your mind? Is there an area of existence where if the super league team conference happens that just essentially looks like pro football with 2 conferences and Utah gets the invite, do you think there's a way that a program could be built in Salt Lake that does look and feel like the programs down south? Or is it just kind of like what the World Cup is in soccer and
Yeah.
that is the U.S. might be good and sneaky and gritty and get out of group, but they're never beating France or whatever.
I think that's a good analogy. I would point to, in the current model, not this future theoretical Super League. I think the current model is a lot of things have to go right, and you would probably use TCU from a couple of years as the kind of the one team that busted the mold, so to speak, and got to a college football playoff title game and got their doors blown off by Georgia. For Utah to contend and be one of those teams in a future theoretical Super League, it will require a whole ton of money, a ton of investment in still what Utah does best, which is player development. I don't think that will ever leave. But in this theoretical scenario, as always, you'll have to have, in my opinion, a potential top 10 quarterback in the country. You'll still have to have a very good defense, and you will have to have the types of skill players that can break a defense's back. And I'm not saying that Utah needs to recruit that 17-year-old kid at Alabama who is doing ballet moves in real time against Georgia, but those are going to be the types of guys that you need to compete for a national title in the future. And those guys are few and far between. And odds are they're going to end up going to the powers that be, and that's just the way it's going to go.
All right, moving over to the topic du jour, the soup du jour. Sounds lovely. I'll have that. Of course, everybody wants to talk about Cameron Rising. Everybody wants to talk about the quarterback position, and it's the one question I get more than anything else, whether it's friends, family, or people on social just sending me direct messages. And I wanted to get because I have sent people to the piece that you wrote and released on September the 19th when you've had access to Cam and his family. So the one thing that I feel confident saying without any information, because we don't get anything, as everybody knows, is that he's not healthy and sandbagging. He's not saving himself for the NFL. It feels like if he when he's ready, he will play. He just is hurt, and he certainly wants to play as bad as anybody, but you had the opportunity to talk to him about this very thing. I know we've discussed it, but there is this portion of our community that, for whatever reason, has leaned into some tinfoil hat conspiracy that Cam could actually play, and he just isn't. That's the one thing, Chris, I feel confident in saying is not happening. Give me your thoughts.
Well, I will point to, reality is whatever you see on social media. But I did see earlier today that there were photos of Cam being circulated at a fan autograph event, and he has two braces on those two fingers on his right hand. Meaning, if you can sift through the BS, wasn't necessarily worried about a laceration or whatever. Like, clearly those fingers either suffered severe sprains or dislocations or whatever. You're not wearing individual stints on fingers 3 weeks after if it's just a cut. You're just not. I know I'm not a doctor, but let's just operate in the realm of reality. So the realm of reality is Cam is hurt. I don't understand why or how a very frustrated, pent up portion of the Utah fan base is now staring at the chemtrails, shaking their fists. But I think that is unfortunately the world we live in now. It does not make any sort of sense for Cam to not play because he is somebody who has NFL aspirations. Dane Brugler, who is our NFL draft guru at The Athletic, when I wrote that Cam story, he said, Cam has a chance to be drafted if he stays healthy and has a great year statistically. Obviously, that was right before he hurt his hand. But it's like Cam understands that he has to play in order to impress NFL scouts and front offices. So for folks who are out there thinking that Cam is just sitting idly by and just kind of enjoying this, I don't really know what to tell you. I guess it's convenient for people to find a lane of futility and just drive in it for as long as they can because they're frustrated. But maybe it's a byproduct again, Spence, of these people believing that Utah was going to win a national championship this year. I don't know. Like maybe in their heart of hearts, they thought that Cam was going to lead them to the promised land. And if so, good for them. But again, like I said last week, you can't be mad at a football player for getting hurt. That is the whole point of the game, is to physically hit somebody else as hard as you can. And it is so unfortunate for Cam and this fan base that he's been hurt in back-to-back years. But yeah, I also don't want to give too much credence to the folks who are living on the outer margins, because I don't think that is like the overwhelming popular opinion. But still, at the same time, it is very odd and very troubling that people are convinced of this, as you mentioned, tinfoil hat scenario.
Fair point. I do think it's fair if people are over the charade. I do think it's fair if people are over game time decision week to week. Oh, he's out there warming up. He goes out as a captain and sees the coin flip, and then boom, it's Isaac. I think it's fair if people are over that, and I think it's fair if people are frustrated with the direction the program has taken with the information surrounding Cameron. I think that's fair.
I agree. I agree, but at the same time, we're talking about an injury that is theoretically something that can be measured in real time. It is not Cam's knee that was ripped to shreds last year. He has to get out there and see how he's feeling. What if Cam went out there, Spence, and couldn't put zip on the ball and threw 5 picks against Arizona? I'm just saying, like, if that happened, how are we going to view that potential scenario? Then fans would be even more mad. Cam shouldn't have been playing. He wasn't ready. Why'd he put himself out there? I understand the frustration, but like, while last year was a will he, won't he, from like a practice point of view up until about this point last year, this is very much like potential in real time. Let's see how he looks. You don't want to put a quarterback out there that can throw it as fast as me. You don't. It makes no sense to do that. So if Cam's somebody who says he's not ready, it makes sense for a guy who has led you to 2 Pac-12 titles. You got to listen to that guy, because he's not going to like put himself above the team. That's not who he is. So I don't understand this line of thinking where like Cam is hurt and he's going to be hurt until he comes back and plays. Like I don't want to sound like a parent, but you kind of got to suck it up and deal with it, fans. That's just the reality.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. All right, away from Utah, over to the potential biggest, if not the biggest, one of the top 3 or 4 biggest surprises in college football. I don't think it's a surprise to Kalani. I don't think it's a surprise to Jay Hill. BYU finds themselves 5-0 and atop the table. Well, sorry, football fans, atop the standings in the Big 12, as they've won a couple of conference games and they've stayed clean. How real is this start? What are you ready to say on this Wednesday about BYU?
Don't know if I can declare them legit yet. I think I want to see them get through the month of October, even before the Utah game. I think Arizona will present a very stiff test for this team. I'm telling you, man, Noah Fafita, what a player. I mean, we talk about, the whole stereotypes of you need tall quarterbacks and you need these measurements or whatever. Like, that kid can really play, and he is a hell of a player. So I think BYU will have their hands full when Arizona comes to town next week. I want to see them, see how they play against Arizona, OK State, and, a trip to UCF. Because while UCF did get beat by Colorado, they're still a very different team compared to most teams that, BYU and Utah will play this year, in that, like, they want to run the ball 50 times a game. And you never know how games like that will pan out. So, kudos to Kalani and Aaron and Jay and those players. They basically told everyone to go fly a kite. I think they were picked 13th or 14th to start the season. Nobody really envisioned them being 5-0 entering the month of October. But again, it's like in any sport, it all depends on when you get hot. You don't want to get too hot in September and October and fizzle out come November, December. If they can maintain this and be in contention come, Thanksgiving time, good on them. But we got to see them prove it in the next coming weeks.
All right, so both teams have played 5 games. BYU has Arizona at home, OK State at home, UCF on the road. Utah, before they see BYU, is Arizona State on the road, TCU at home, then Houston on the road. Are we potentially going to see an 8-0 BYU team against a 7-1 Utah team on November the 9th in Salt Lake? And if so, what will that look and feel like?
Oof, I don't think we're ready locally for that type of matchup. I think the discourse will turn vile real quick online, as it usually does. But it could be, and it could be awesome. It would be awesome. I am a firm backer in these teams should be playing forever. and the fact that it's now a conference game, even though it's a bummer that it's not the last game of the year, like this game will have, Big 12 conference title implications. So if it is an undefeated BYU team going up against a 7-1, Utah team in Salt Lake, it'll just be another chapter, man. These games are always good, even when they're bad. And listen, it would be very exciting, and there will be, as usual, no lack for storylines. But BYU's got to get through the next few weeks. I kind of got to see, like the Baylor game was like, oh dang, like these guys are doing it, and then it's like, well, Jake again with some bad turnovers and like nearly let Baylor sneak back in. I want to see how BYU plays over the course of October before I start, circling that November 9th game.
I had a couple of other questions for you, Chris, but I'm getting a colonoscopy tomorrow, and today is prep day, so I really have to go. I appreciate your time, and yeah, man, I got to go. So we'll chat soon.
I appreciate you. Good luck, man.
All right, Chris Camerati, more next on ESPN 700. I was going to go to the RSL game tonight. RSL is taking on Minnesota, 7:30. America First Field. Go to rsl.com for single game tickets. I'm not sure. I don't think it's happening. I don't think the RSL game is happening. I don't think anything is happening.
Why not?
Bro, have you had a colonoscopy before?
Not yet, but I am close to 30.
No, you're not. Oh, you're close to 30, but I don't think you need one until you're like 40.
I'm going to say 30. I'm going to say I'm not a doctor, nor did I stay at a Holiday Inn last night.
All right, fair enough.
But I'm going to say, just to be safe, don't wait till you're 40.
Well, why don't you go ahead and check with the doc instead of lobbing out the advice to the peeps? I'll tell you, nobody cares about this, but kids, let's have a grown-up conversation. Uncle Spence is having a colonoscopy tomorrow. Today's prep day. And all of my friends that are a little bit older than I am have always told me, procedure's not that bad. It's the day before when they're cleaning you out that's rough. So I'm on a clear water diet, have been since last night. And at noon, I took my first dose of, hey, this is going to clean you out stuff, whatever they call it. And I was waiting for it to hit, and it just hit at the end of Kamrani's interview, and I had to sprint, and I'm telling you, I was 5 seconds away from going home.
And, Spence, they've shut down our close bathrooms over here.
Oh, I had to sprint to the other side. Everybody was looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, don't talk to me. I'm, you know the Dumb and Dumber scene when Lloyd lays the laxative on Harry?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's that's the deal.
Okay.
So I don't think I can go to the game. I think I have to be home because the deal is when I get home at 5, I have to take the bigger dose of the clean you out stuff. And if the small dose of the clean you out stuff just did what it did to me, the bigger dose is going to mandate that I am by a toilet all night tonight.
Well, luckily for you, and I know this because I know how things work over at America First Field, you tend to, at the games while we're out in the cold, out in the press box, the open air, you're hanging with the big shots in the press box with a nice fancy bathroom adjoined to the room. You can go to the game.
I don't know, man. I don't know because it's about a 30-minute drive from the house to America First Field. And I'm telling you, if what just happened is any indicator, there's no pull over to a Maverick. It is you are going right now, whether you like it or not.
That's fair. That's fair.
Here's what we'll do. We'll give away a $25 gift card to Farmer and Chemist. Text in 877-353-0700. Let's get some colonoscopy advice from our older listeners out there. If you've had one, what was the night before like? Is it smart of me to leave the house? Should I stay home and just be close to the porcelain god if I have to pray to it?
It's really dangerous that we don't have a dump button today, Spence.
Good, Porter. 877-353-0700. Text in some colonoscopy advice, the best advice. Yes, this is what we do on the show. I'm going to send you to Farmer and Chemist with $25 in your pocket. All right, Porter, let's hear you chime in on kind of the topic du jour, the soup du jour. I'll have that. It sounds lovely. We started things off today with kind of lessons learned. I do this every year on the show. September's behind us, 5 games behind us for most every team. Some pleasant surprises, some disappointments. Let's start with Utah football. What have you learned about the Utes through 1 month?
Yeah, man, it's hard because it's been so up and down. It's been so the context that you really have to include is that Utah hasn't been at full strength. Yeah, we've talked a lot about Cam Rising, but it's also on the defensive end. It's Kareni Reed, it's Connor O'Toole, it's Samode Pepa, Tavita Fotu, Aliki Vimahi, Kenan Johnson. We can keep going. The defensive side of the ball has dealt with far more injuries than the offensive side, and that is actually more reminiscent to what we saw last year, and that's been unfortunate for Utah. But what we've learned about this team specifically is that they have a defense that's good enough to compete for a Big 12 championship. Offensively, I think we've learned that the future of the quarterback position under Isaac Wilson is something that Utah fans should have optimism for, but we've also learned that he's 18 years old. And part of the high that we got against Oklahoma State was kind of tempered down by a tough performance, of course, against Arizona. And I think, Spence, what we've learned about Oklahoma State, which is that they're not good. They're not good. So that's part of what we've learned about Utah is that we're also learning about some of their opponents. I think this is a team that should and can compete for a Big 12 title. I know we're still in the limbo in the quarterback room, But if we operate under the assumption that it's Cam Rising back for Arizona State, I think this is a team that should be playing for a Big 12 title in a few months. If we operate under the assumption that Isaac Wilson is under center come Arizona State, then I think this is a team that is going to be fighting for a win each and every week in the Big 12. Basically, they are living their Pac-12 reality in kind of the middle parts when they were searching for a real franchise quarterback, if you will. I know it's different, but we can say that now.
No,
they're getting paid.
Is. I think it absolutely is.
When Utah was searching for, if you will, a franchise quarterback, Jordan Wynn had the injuries. Travis Wilson was talented, but we saw him play at the NFL level at tight end, so it wasn't necessarily your prototypical quarterback. And Utah was, struggling to be 500 in the Pac-12? That's what they'll do with Isaac Wilson right now if he is your quarterback going forward. But again, with the weapons they have, with the defense they have, if they can get back to full strength or close to during this bye week, you have a month, 2-month stretch where Utah has a real chance to kind of supplant themselves atop the conference, and I think they should do that with some health and some luck.
This is our most popular text topic in the history of this show. Now, we don't do a ton of texts. Because we don't take calls. I don't do the whole hey, tweet at me so we can create topics for the show. But I'm soliciting colonoscopy advice the night before, wondering if I should leave the house to go to the RSL game. Dear God, don't leave the house. 2 fingers is always better than 1. My dad had one a year back. The advice is to take the big dose. Don't leave the house. Don't want anyone to hear your noises from the restroom. Do not leave the house. For the love of God, I repeat, do not leave the house. Porter, I am not going to this soccer game tonight. It looks like there's a consensus on the text line that the best thing I can do is go home after the show and hang out next to the bathroom.
You know what that sounds like to me?
What's that?
A challenge.
No way. Go to the soccer game and soil myself in front of my friends, and my son and his girlfriend is not an option. My son is bringing his girlfriend to the game.
Again,
it's not happening. No,
I mean,
don't be a bad influence.
It's up to you.
Be part of the solution. I keep telling you, man, be solution-based.
It sounds like you're just not a grinder. I thought you were all in.
In this scenario, I am not a grinder. Somebody says go check into a hotel and stay there alone. The next 18 hours of your life will not be fun. All right, keep them coming in. You're not going to the game. Cheeks together. That's enough. All right, Porter, let me get your take on what we talked about earlier, lessons learned through 1 month from BYU, who, if you listen to Kalani, you listen to A-Rod, both have been on the show this year. Jay Hill, Kelly Papinga, go down the list. They all told us they were being overlooked. But here's the thing. Every team that does not have high expectations says the same thing every year. It's always fun when you can actually see the proof on the field, and we've seen the proof. The defense is nasty. Jake has settled in. I still have some questions, certainly offensively, because in the second half against Baylor, Retzlaff kind of reverted back to who he's been, which is a talented kid, just mistake-prone. Your lessons learned through 5 games, 1 month from BYU.
Yeah, I think it's harder to nail down any specific lessons for BYU because of how chaotic some of those games have been. We go back to the Kansas State game, which looked on the final scorebook like a huge blowout, but it was really kind of a dogfight when you go down into the film and into the stat book. Some really good wins for BYU, but you look at their schedule ahead, and I do, like Kamrani, want to see them get through this next month leading into the Utah game. Their schedule starts to really get going. Of course, they have this bye week to get ready for it, but I still got to see a lot from this BYU team. As you said, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, Jake Retzlaff has been throwing better than I think I've ever seen him throw the football, but he's also leaving turnover-worthy throws out there. He's giving teams chances to pick the ball off, and they will. Some of these other Big 12 teams will capitalize on some of the chances that he's given other teams. And for BYU, I know you never put luck into the analysis, but if you watch that Kansas State game, man, there were some bounces that went BYU's way, and sometimes that happens. Any given Sunday, that happens. It's not going to be the case all throughout the year. So my question with this BYU team, Spence, and one of the only remaining questions, outside of some explosiveness on offense, some maybe more tests defensively. I think defensively they're good, but I want to see them against some better offenses. But one of the only things that I do wonder about is when they are tested, when they are down 21-7 in the second quarter or a third quarter, when they, aren't getting some of those bounces, how does BYU respond? We haven't seen that in 2024 yet, and I think it will tell us a lot about this football team when we do see it.
So the Big Ten has simply just been recalibrated. Porter referenced this. We talked about it early in the show. Oklahoma State, they might just be, not good. One of the three favorites, according to media, I believe one of the three favorites, according to Vegas, one of the three favorites to win the Big 12. They cannot establish the run. They do not have a capable quarterback to keep defenses honest. So teams are stacking the box, and Ollie Gordon is averaging 67 yards per game. It might be time to remove them as a legitimate contender unless some crazy turnaround happens. And, kicking the tires on some of the stuff earlier, it does feel like the SEC is going to get at least 4, if not 5 teams in to the CFP, the expanded 12-team CFP. Bama, shout out Kalen DeBoer, by the way. I mean, that dude taking over that job and having to deal with that fan base and potentially upping the ante with how good they've looked. I still think Georgia is really good, but Georgia on paper was the one team to stand up to Bama's physical rushing attack. They essentially have a quarterback who can run it like he's a halfback, like a running back. I think Texas is legit. I don't think that's a hot take. Tennessee has shown everybody enough by now to understand that they're certainly to be reckoned with. Missouri's good. LSU's better than we thought after an opening day loss. I don't think Oklahoma is a team to be reckoned with, but they're in the top 25. So is A&M. I mean, they might have 5 teams in the CFP. So, Porter, at this point, is it safe to say, based off the start of the conference play, that the Big 12 could potentially only get one team in? That's the team that wins the conference.
It's a possibility. I think that there's still so much chaos that we will see unfold in the college football season. But with how the Big 12 performed in non-conference, and more specifically, Spence, how they're kind of cannibalizing early, right? I don't think anyone expects, outside of a few people in Provo, I'm sure, expects any team to finish this year undefeated. So there is a legitimate chance that the Big 12 only gets one team in the playoff. But that also has to do with how does some of these G5 teams finish the year, right? That could come down to literally the final day of the season where one of those teams that's on the fringe, maybe a G5 team with an at-large bid, they lose their conference title game, or they lose the game leading into their conference title game, and all of a sudden they're out because those teams can't afford a single loss in most scenarios. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of SEC, but right now the SEC has some of the best teams in the country, so that's rightfully so. Big Ten will get multiple teams, and then from then on, Spence, I really do think that it's going to be pretty wide open and does depend on how many at-large teams really have a resume that even is worth it, because those teams have almost no room for error.
All right, there you go. College football September is behind us. We have turned our calendars to October. Both Utah and BYU are on byes this week. They're back at it against the Arizona schools, respectively, coming up next week. All right, before we catch a break, Neil Smith is going to join us coming up next. Former general manager of the New York Rangers. My man won a Stanley Cup. We'll talk Utah Hockey Club. We'll talk NHL. Going to do a little jazz with Andy Larson. We're back to college football in the 5 o'clock hour. The Black Desert Championship returns. Well, doesn't return. It comes to Utah for the first time at the Black Desert Resort. What returns to Utah is the PGA Tour for the first time in more than 60 years. Tickets are available right now at blackdesertevents.com. It's October the 9th through the 13th. It's right around the corner. And their Instagram page is at Black Desert Championship. I want to tell you about my friends at Bout Time Pub. You're doing it wrong if you're not at Bout Time every weekend watching your Utes, Cougs, Utah Hockey Club, or the Jazz. It's Utah's premier sports bar. Amazing food, killer cocktails, alcoholic, and also mocktails, non-alcoholic cocktails. Make Bout Time your place for sports or even brunch. All food made from scratch and new mocktails for those of you who don't partake in alcohol. More TVs than tables. All About Time TVs have their own receivers, so they have all the games going live with free high-speed Wi-Fi. It's a great place to, quote, work from home during the games. Locations: Ogden, Layton, West Valley, West Jordan, Sandy, Tooele, Harriman, Bluffdale, Lehigh, and Vineyard. Utah Sports Bar, and celebrating their 15-year anniversary now. In-house smoked wings and fresh made from scratch food. Brunch is available on the weekends from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., including a build-your-own Bloody Mary bar. They show every UFC event, so UFC 307 on Saturday night. Go to About Time for it. Home for the NHL, Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball, the NBA, of course, the NFL, college football, too. They've got MLB Extra Innings. They've got the MLS Season Pass on Apple. They show every Jazz game and also have NBA League Pass, NHL Center Ice, all regional sports channels with our friends at About Time Pub. 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Guys, we're going to make it. Thank you for all of the great advice on the text line. We have one poorly behaved listener who's telling me to go to the game and wear Depends and hope for the best. No, thank you.
There we go.
No, Porter. I hope you go through this at one point, and I'm not going to be as understanding as you should be for me today.
I'm actually being really understanding and open. I want this to be maybe a learning experience for you and others.
You want me to poop my pants at the soccer game.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I know. All right, Neil Smith joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. We got CK today, Chris Camerani, 5 o'clock hour, college football coming up in the final hour of the show. To take you home on this Wednesday, we are going to do a little jazz as training camp has opened. Andy Larson will stop by. But it is time now to talk some hockey. Excited for this. He's going to join us on a weekly basis all year long now that the hockey season is upon us. Former general manager of the New York Rangers. My man has won a Stanley Cup. It's great to catch up with Neil Smith once again on the drive. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Happy Wednesday to you. Well, I'm okay, except I live in South Carolina, and we took the brunt of that Helene that just went through and hit western North Carolina, and it hit Greenville, South Carolina, and we've been without power since Friday. So a lot of people think I'm in the dark all the time, but I'm definitely in the dark now.
I got to know, what's it been like to be in the eye of that storm? I mean, obviously, I'm keeping up with the news cycle. Super sad. I think the last death count was like 150 or something. So what's it been like, Neil? What's it like down there?
It was horrible during the storm. I mean, there was so much rain. We're in a mountainous area, so there was no chance of flooding us, but it was just a lot of downed trees. And then when you go around these communities, and particularly it's sad when you go into a poor part of the community and see homes that have been hit by trees and power lines down, and that the people that live there probably don't have homeowners insurance and probably don't have the money to fix the home. So that's what's really tough, and hopefully FEMA can help those folks out, because it's really sad.
Goodness gracious. Well, I'm glad you're safe, and I appreciate your time today, and I'm excited to have you on as a consistent guest to help all of us out here. Yeah, for sure, to help all of us out here kind of learn this game, as we are now Hockeytown, USA. And I want to start just generally speaking, Neil, what is the preseason in the NHL? What are the points of emphasis in the preseason as a guy that was a roster constructor that ran teams? Is it a combination of trying to understand who your young players are, kind of helping the vets fit in? What ultimately is the preseason for, mainly in pro hockey?
It actually is to give those players that are on the borderline of making it see how they can do within that major league setting of playing in some games, albeit a lot of veterans aren't playing in those games. But, if you've got your player number 24, 25, this would be defenseman number 8, number 9, goaltender number 3 or 4, that you want to see how close are they to playing. And the preseason is people are playing at full out in preseason, as you can see by the number of injuries that have happened around the league. So that's what you're really trying to judge. Pretty much going into the training camp who your team's going to be. There might be a couple of spots open, but even then, you're talking 2 or 3 at the most.
So far, Neil, the Utah Hockey Club has looked really good in the preseason, 4-1-0. Fans should be excited because we're getting hockey, period. But in your experience, does a successful preseason oftentimes tell a story about what you can see during the regular season, or is there really not much there?
You know what? You've never really been able to judge it based on that. But the only thing is, I will say, Spence, is that every hockey game you go into, you want to win it. And even as a GM president, I didn't like to sit through us losing a game, even when it was preseason, and even when we didn't have a lot of our regulars in the lineup. You never want to see your team lose. So starting 4-1 in preseason is never a bad thing. It can only be positive. It may not be a complete picture of how the rest of the season's going to go. But I might add that the fans in Utah got to be excited because of the improvements that Doug Armstrong and not Doug Armstrong, he's in St. Louis, that Bill Armstrong and his crew did this summer. I think they made some great improvements to the team. And, as I had told you in previous shows, I thought that the Arizona Coyotes were right on the cusp of being a wild card contender. So I think these acquisitions they've made have pushed them up. Plus the stability of being in Utah this year, knowing that's where they're going to be. There's not going to be any rumors about moving the team somewhere else like there was for them last year. So I'm looking for really good things to come out of the Utah team this year.
Let me ask you about a couple of players here. You referenced some of the additions that were made, and since you and I last spoke, Bill Armstrong in the front office brings in Mikhail Sergachev there on that back line. He's a young defenseman, but has already won a couple of cups. And before the offseason, you referenced that you thought that they might try to add to the defensive side, and certainly Mikhail Sergachev is a player that is now he's their highest paid defenseman. Again, 26 years old. He's been really impressive in preseason. What should our Utah hockey listener fans know about Mikhail Sergachev?
You know, he's a winner. He's won those 2 Stanley Cups in Tampa. He's a guy that I was surprised that they traded. He did get injured twice last year, and for lengthy times. That doesn't mean that he's fragile or anything like that. That just means that you hope that that injury doesn't get, hurt again. But he's a very ultra competitive guy, and he's a really good NHL defenseman. I mean, you're talking, a top 4 defenseman at the worst. He's a top 4 guy, so that's a great acquisition, and that's going to definitely strengthen Utah's defense.
So, we've talked about some of these players before, but I just kind of want to run down the list here to help our hockey fan listeners kind of understand what this team is all about. And it doesn't surprise you at all that Clayton Keller, even in the preseason, is the leading scorer with a couple of goals, and he also is leading with 4 assists, 6 total points. He is not a new player at all, but it looks like he is on his way to stardom in this league. What should our listeners know about Clayton Keller?
What you should know about him is that he is a great offensive talent. He's going to be probably the best, if not then very close to the best offensive player you've got. He enjoys scoring goals. He enjoys racking up points. I think on nights when he doesn't get a point, he's not happy with himself. He's not happy with his game. That doesn't mean that he puts his points ahead of the team winning. I don't mean that at all. But you need a Clayton Keller on your team. You need that go-to offensive guy that on a night when your team's not going great, that he comes up with his points, his goals, and pushes you into a W when maybe you really didn't deserve it. So he is looking towards stardom. He is looking towards being an all-star in the league. And again, I think he's just a great young player.
Bill in the front office made a couple of other acquisitions, so let's get into some other names here. John Marino is another. I mean, Sergachev was kind of like the off-season prize, but what should our listeners know about another new player in John Marino?
A veteran defenseman and a guy that's going to add to the depth of your defense. He's not going to be Sergachev. He's not going to be a highlight reel guy for sure, but he's going to be somebody that's been in the NHL quite a long time and is going to be able to really bolster the defense so that it's going to be a place. Defense is going to be a part of the game in Utah that you're going to have a lot of confidence in. You're going to go into games thinking, well, there's no way that we're going to be messing up defensively and getting scored on every night because we're not very good defensively. You are going to be good defensively for sure because you've got a good defensive core in Utah to start this whole franchise with.
So, Ian Cole, it's interesting because I wanted to get your take on this. This is a young team, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately you do want to, and the Jazz are doing this. They're bringing Patty Mills and some other vets. But the Jazz, ultimately are relying on their young players to carry them towards the future. Ian Cole, 35 years old. What'd you make of that signing, having kind of a grown-up in the room?
I think he's just they're trying to stabilize the room. It's the young guys that are going to add the energy, and and they're going to add the foot speed, and they're going to chase pucks. And it's going to be the older guys, though, that particularly in the room that have experience and that can play still. Obviously, that they're still good NHL players, but they don't have the foot speed that the younger guys do. They maybe get more tired on back-to-back and 3 games in 4 nights in that situation, then a 35-year-old is going to get more tired than a 21-year-old for sure. But they're going to stabilize those young guys. When the young guys get too excited, get too off the, jumping off the deep end, they're going to say, whoa, wait a minute here. And that's why you need those older guys, those guys that can settle the younger guys down.
What is realistic to expect from some of these young draft picks right out of the gates? It's different in pro hockey than it is in the NBA. When if you're drafted in the lottery, if you're drafted in the top 5, you're expected to play right away, and you're paid like you're going to play right away. Generally speaking, because I know you've been without power, what would you tell our hockey fan listeners out here what to expect from the young players? How much do we expect them to play right away? What does the development process look like and such?
Well, the one thing you don't want to do with a young player, if he's not ready, don't put him in the lineup and think that, well, he'll get ready while he's in the lineup, because that doesn't happen. You want to send him back to junior, or you want to, in the case of when he's eligible to play in the minors, to go into the minor leagues and not jump into the NHL too soon. Because this is like, Spence, if you put a young guy in the NHL too early, it would be like taking a 10th grader and saying, okay, we want to put you into Harvard, and we think you're ready for Harvard. And a guy, the kid's a 10th grader. He's not ready for Harvard yet. Now, some brilliant 10th graders, they might be able to get by as a freshman at Harvard, but most can't. They need a couple more years, and that's the same thing in the NHL. And you can really hurt the development of a player if you put him in too early. So I think everybody's just got to be patient with the 18-year-olds, and don't expect that many are going to play in the NHL right away. There's going to be, as you know, Celebrini's going to play for San Jose this year. Unfortunately, he got hurt against Utah, but he's going to play in the NHL this year and probably be one of San Jose's very best players. But that's, a very high franchise pick on a very poor team, and that's something totally different than Utah.
Utah used their 6th pick on Tej Aginla, and his dad, Jerome, who obviously a Hall of Famer. What do you make of? I know you haven't seen him play very much, and chances are he's not going to play a lot. He did play the other night, had an assist, but what would you tell our listeners about kind of this family tree, this pedigree between Jerome and his son Tej?
I don't know their relationship. I imagine it's good, but I can speak to the character of Jerome Aginla, captain of the Calgary Flames for so long, and such a leader and fearless, and played during a very tough era and battled it out every night, and then turned around and was polite to everybody and signed autographs all night and did anything that was asked of him. And I'm sure that this apple hasn't fallen far from the tree, meaning Tej is going to be just like his dad, and I'm sure he wants to emulate his dad, and he wants to make his dad proud of him. So I'm sure he's going to come in and have a lot of the same qualities that Jerome had. How he plays, I don't know. Will he be better tough to be better offensively than Jerome, but will he be a different type of player than Jerome? I don't know. But obviously the scouts thought enough of him to take them where they did. And he's certainly got great bloodlines having Jerome Aginla. There's nobody who can say a bad word about Jerome Aginla.
Connor Ingram is the goaltender out this way, and I just turned 27, so he is still somewhat young and had a solid year last year. What's your expectation as far as growth year over year from the goaltender out here, Connor Ingram?
I mean, he's at a really good part of his career now. He's at the age when, they should be taking that step into solidifying themselves as a number one goaltender, as a go-to guy, as a guy that goes in against all the tougher opponents. He's right there in his age bracket when he should be able to do that. And he certainly had an impressive year last year. A year that, you and I have talked about it. It was tough to judge a lot of stuff based on last year's Coyotes team because, they were playing well, everything was going great, and then all of a sudden it gets out that they might be moving to Utah, and it seemed like they couldn't, you're playing in the little college arena, and all these rumors are swirling around, and it seemed like that seemed to take them down. But with Connor Ingram, I think they've definitely got a number one goalie. How good he becomes is up to him, but he's at that age when he should be able to take that spot and run with it.
So we've seen Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley playing together. Gunther's a right winger. Logan Cooley, who joined the show this week, is a center, but they're both really young. I wanted to ask you, though, about the decision to sign Dylan Guenther to an 8-year contract. That's not even allowed in pro basketball. He has played really well in the preseason. Both these two youngsters look really good. How commonplace, Neil, is an 8-year deal in pro hockey?
I'm going to say something. Unfortunately, it's very common now. And when I say unfortunately, because I just don't believe in giving 8-year contracts. But having said that, Bill Armstrong and the rest of the GMs are sort of sunk because that's the standard for that type of player, that age player, that young player. He's coming off his entry-level contract. And if he's a guy that you want to hold on to and you want to make sure that he plays his career with the Utah club, you've got to sign him long term because that's what everybody else is getting. And if you said to him, I really only want to give you a 3-year contract, then they would say back to you, well, we'll just let our contract expire and take our chances when it's going to expire. So they've sort of got you in that sense. There's 32 teams. There's not enough great players to go around. So those players that you do have, like Gunther, that you want on the team for their whole career, you're sort of on bended knee at that point if you're the GM.
Tell us what you know about Andre Tourigny. They call him Bear, and he's been kind of a fun character out here to get to know. What sort of coach is he? What sort of style of play does he like to play? And what do you know about the head coach out this way, Neil?
I don't know him personally, and I'm going to say that by judging him by what he had with Arizona in the first few years that he was coaching isn't fair. I think that you can really tell a lot about a coach once they once their team is in a position where they can actually coach them and make a difference. If you don't have the player personnel, you could have God as your coach and he can't get you into the playoff. But once you've got the player personnel, then the real skill set of the coach comes out. And I think with Andre, he's got that team now. I think that he had it last year to that certain point. He's well liked. That's for sure. The players like him. There's no problems there. So this will be a good test for him this year in the first year in Utah.
So, of course, we like winners out here. We have a pro basketball team that's always been very good. They've never won a championship, but they've been very competitive. Just broadly speaking, Neil, what should expectations be? Should it be, okay, this is a playoff team? Should it be, okay, they should be in the mix at the end for a playoff spot, or maybe even something beyond? What are your expectations from a 30,000-foot view for the Utah Hockey Club this year?
My expectations for them are clearly that they should be in the battle all year to be at least in the wild card spot. So that means they're battling in those top 8 spots all year, and to get into that 8th spot at the very least. If they are a team that isn't battling for that 8th spot, I'd be very disappointed based upon what they did last year, based upon their acquisitions. I would be very surprised if they weren't. I did a show on NHL Wraparound, and we did the best off-season improvements in the league. And I gave Utah honorable mention. Now, we only did 4 teams, and they got honorable mention, meaning they were 5 or 6 along with St. Louis. That's pretty good. There were 4 obvious ones when you think about Nashville, when you think about New Jersey, and Vancouver, but it was Utah actually, and St. Louis, and quite frankly Chicago, who I don't think will make the playoffs, but they've improved during the offseason. But I think that Utah should really be kicking at the door to be in the playoffs next year.
Since you brought up Chicago, Neil.
Or this year, sorry.
Sure. Yeah, we got you. Since you brought up Chicago, let's dig in, because that's the first game. And every time I say next week the Chicago Blackhawks are going to be in town, I just start laughing because I never thought I'd say the sentence. But they're landing here to play Utah Hockey Club in the inaugural game, the home opener. Tell us about Chicago, the first opponent for Utah Hockey Club next week.
Well, they're going to be, Connor Bedard is their headliner. They have made a lot of acquisitions during the summer to take themselves from a doormat team to at least a team that's going to give other teams in the league trouble. They're not going to be an easy W for anybody this season. And they got a new captain in Nick Foligno, who was there last season, by the way, with them. And that's a good pick for them of a captain. Mrazek will probably be in net that first night. I think you're going to see an exciting team. It's not, as I said, it's not going to be a pushover for Utah that first night. But anytime you can see Connor Bedard play, it's a good night, because this guy is a tremendous young player. He's very small, but he's like a little buzzsaw. He's got tremendous skill.
All right, Neil, before I set you loose, who do you like in the West? Who are the teams that our Utah Hockey Club fan listeners should be watching out for as far as the cream of the crop out here in the Western Conference?
I think the Nashville Predators made an enormous improvements in the offseason. They're an older team, but they don't care. They seem to be wanting to play. They're going for 25. They're not going for 27 or 28, meaning 2028 or 2027. They're going for 2025. I think they'll be very good. I think Vancouver made some improvements, and they were already good last year. And, of course, you're always going to want to make sure that you have tickets to go and see Utah play against Edmonton, and you get to see Connor McDavid. You get to see Draisaitl and Zach Hyman. Those three guys are tremendous, along with the rest of their team. I mean, they went to Game 7 in the finals, so there was a reason for that. But those three teams in the West, I think, are superior teams.
All right, Neil, before I set you loose, we have a lot of new hockey fans out here. We have a lot of hockey fans out here, period. That building has been jam-packed for preseason action. They're looking for content. You've got a great podcast for our listeners out here. Where can they go find all your work?
Well, it's called NHL Wraparound, and I host it with my buddy Vic Morin, who's an encyclopedic memory of the NHL. But you can get it on any podcast platform, and we like to ask very interesting questions and have great guests and not be doing what everybody else is doing in the media. We're consider ourselves hockey guys that are asking other hockey guys about what they think. So I think anybody would find it interesting, and you'll learn things that you didn't know before you turned it on, and that's our goal.
Neil, thank you, sir. Stay safe out there. Thanks so much for the time, and really thrilled to have you along.
Two things I got to say to you before you run.
Go.
One is you got to say that I'm a prophet the way I said that it would be called the Utah Hockey Club.
Yes, sir. You were correct.
The other thing is 17 years ago, weren't you with me in not 17 years ago, 27 years ago, weren't you with me in the Miami Arena with your dad when we were playing in the playoffs against the Florida Panthers?
Let's see, 27. Yes, good memory. I had forgotten about. Wow.
And here's a great story for you.
Okay.
I ratted you out to your dad about drinking Mountain Dew. You were drinking Mountain Dew, and I said, Dave, I thought you weren't supposed to have any caffeine. And he said, well, he's drinking. That's not Coke. I said, Mountain Dew has more caffeine in it than any drink you can find. And he went, oh my goodness. And he pulled you away. So all these years later, I still remember ratting you out on the caffeine.
Neil, that was the beginning of a long, slippery slope, my friend. But I do remember that. Good memory. I haven't thought about that in a long time. So now I know it was you that caused the Mountain Dew to be ripped away from me.
Yes, it was. I'm sorry to say. I got to admit it after 27 years.
All good, sir. Thanks so much for the time. Excited to have you on all year long.
Can't wait to be on next time. See ya.
The great Neil Smith, general manager of the Rangers. He's former general manager of the Rangers, the chief scout for the Red Wings. He's going to join us all year long. I bet my dad wishes it was still Mountain Dew. I'm just going to leave that there. Did you hear that story?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I was ratted out for drinking Mountain Dew when I was like 16 or 17 years old back in the day. I never knew it was Neil Smith who told my dad.
So funny. I love that.
The beginning of so many letdowns from my pops. Love you, Dad. All right, brought to you today by Overtime Cards and Collectibles. That's a funny story. If you like sports, you're going to love this spot. They have all the best trading cards and collectibles for all your favorite sports. Basketball, football, NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, MMA, and so much more. You can buy cards from all your favorite athletes, from Cam Rising on the Utes, Keontae George with the Jazz, and all your favorite old-school Jazz players like John Stockton and Karl Malone. Some of the cards are even signed. For all you hockey fans out there, Logan Cooley, friend of the show, of the Utah Hockey Club, will be on site October the 18th for an autograph signing. We're going to be there, so we would love to see you. You don't want to miss it. Go check them out online at overtimecardsandcollectibles.com, where you can buy and trade. Time to welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros. Through 5 weeks of college football and 4 weeks of pro football, I have had access to every single game. The ones I can't watch live, I just DVR and watch later. You can get all your sports in one place. You can save money, and you can support local by dialing 801-424-DISH. What's going on, buddy?
You know, saving money is our most favorite thing. And I'll tell you, we've had a lot of people calling in and saving not just a few dollars. We're talking thousands. We say this 60 to 100 bucks a month if you're a cable DirecTV customer. That's kind of our average. Guys, if it's 100 bucks a month, that's $2,400, and that's excluding the price increase that those providers are going to throw at you if you stay with them. One in the next couple months and another one the following year, or maybe two. Call us up and let's put some money back in your pocket. Get a bigger, faster DVR that auto records the games, auto records the locals, auto hops commercials, have access to your DVR anywhere. You want to watch Amazon Video Prime? It's a channel like any other channel on Dish. You can have access to all the streaming content you want all in one place. And guys, I'll tell you, if you're unhappy with your provider and you know your bill's too much, it doesn't take more than just a few minutes to call us up and say, hey, this is what I have, this is what I need, and see what kind of magic we can do. We still got fantastic gift card solutions with one of our internet providers, a $200 gift card, no commitment, no contract, the same product I've been using for 2 years. It works fantastic, and it's much cheaper than a lot of the other services out there. Call us up, upgrade, save money, put some money back in your pocket, plus I'll send you to dinner on us at JCW's 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. Andy Larson is our guest. Coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Special thanks to Neil Smith, former general manager of the New York Rangers, head scout for the Detroit Red Wings, and now podcast host of the NHL Wraparound, for stopping by today to talk a little Utah Hockey Club. Chris Camerani, 5 o'clock hour college football for you. We've got everything going on. We had Court McGee joined us earlier for a little UFC 307 preview. We have RSL soccer tonight. We have Utah Hockey Club tonight. We have college football in full swing and the Utah Jazz of open training camp, which means it's time now for our guy Andy Larson on a Wednesday afternoon. Andy, happy Wednesday, buddy. How we doing?
I'm good. How about you, man?
I'm good. You heading out to the match?
Yeah, head down there, I don't know, in about an hour or so.
Not a guy. I was planning on going, Andy, but I'm having a procedure tomorrow called a colonoscopy. Have you ever had a colonoscopy?
Oh God, no. I'm too young for that, I feel.
All right. I don't need that from you. What I'm saying is when you actually approach this age and you have one, the day before, not awesome. A lot of prep, a lot of time in the bathroom. So your boy's staying home tonight.
I'm glad that not only I got to learn that, but all of your listeners as well.
Oh, I've been complaining about this all day. This is not a new topic. Okay. Don't get me wrong. So what do you think? We're going to get all three tonight? How do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, look, I think this is a beatable opponent, and looking at the schedule and where RSL stands in the standings, like if they get 6 points from these next two matches, which I think they probably should on paper, they control their own destiny. Not only control their own destiny, I think they clinch either the third or fourth seed. They clinch home field advantage in the first round of the playoffs, which I think is a big deal for this team. So I'm, really hopeful for not only just a result here in these next couple of games, but all 3 points. And they need to finish out games better than they have recently, right? Like that has been the major faux pas. But if they play like they did at the, beginning of the second half, in their last match, then I think they can play well. It's just kind of still a matter of trying to figure out what combinations on the field work and which subs work now that they have nearly everyone healthy back on this roster.
Before we get to the Jazz, one more question here. Ultimately the conversation topically on this show has been, did you trade away the potential for something awesome right now for long-term growth and long game, roster construction ideals? Do you feel that they did that? Let's revisit. We talked to you about it when they made all the moves. Do you think they sacrificed? Because your guy Dave Fox, I was on his show last week, and he said, do you feel more confident now than you did a couple months ago that RSL can make a run? And I said, no, I don't feel more confident now than I did a few months ago when they were beating everybody. Do you feel like something special this season could potentially still be on the table, or did they sacrifice that to play the long game?
Look, I mean, is there a chance that they make a run? Yeah, of course it's soccer, and, I think they have some talented pieces, but to be sure, and, I think we knew this when the Gomez sale happened. They got a lot worse the day they sold Carlos Andres Gomez. Like, there's no question about it. And, he was a top 3 winger in MLS this year, and you don't get better by bringing in, a bunch of guys and hoping to make the team deeper when you lose a star, really a superstar of that caliber. He was, had superstar level production. Now, I don't think it's the wrong move. I still think it's kind of a defensible and probably the right move to sell him and set the club up for the future. But that's exactly what they're doing. I also think that like RSL before the Gomez sale had already turned a negative corner, right? Like they were killing everyone in the first couple of months, but in kind of the middle of the season, June, July, August, they weren't anymore, right? They no longer looked like a Supporters Shield winning team. They no longer looked like an MLS Cup winning team. And so I don't think like you really sacrificed that by selling Gomez. I think if they had been clearly, at a Columbus and Miami level, then, I think you can have real complaints, but they weren't. They were clearly a second-tier contender at that point. And now, let's be honest, they're probably a third-tier contender. But, I kind of still understand the move, and I'm keeping my expectations of what RSL does this year still relatively, minimal as a result. I
got to ask you who you put in goal. At this point, Gavin had the chance. He didn't grab it. Zach was in the other night, and it went the way that it seems to go lately. It was Zach in there. Down the stretch run into the postseason, is it the vet or is it the kid?
Probably Zach at this point, which sucks because, you want to build for the future. But, I don't know that Gavin has actually been worse, but for whatever reason, he seems to instill more confidence in the back line, or Zach seems to instill more confidence in the back line. But look, these are two bad options, and I think it's fair to criticize Arcel's front office for not getting a better keeper at some point. I mean, look, I think observers of the team, including certainly me, have been calling for them to at some point just sign a free agent keeper who's better than this. Those options were available. They stuck to their guys, and as a result, I think Arcel may have the worst goalkeeper situation in MLS.
Oof, goodness gracious. All right, a little off-court news. The city council has given its final blessing to the project downtown, and Ryan Smith is going to get a cool $1 billion, and taxpayers are going to foot part of the bill. We knew this was coming, but it's finalized. What should our listeners know?
Yeah, look, it's, I guess $900 million to Smith Entertainment Group out of a 0.5% sales tax that applies to all purchases within the city limits of Salt Lake City. City officials say that about 2/3 of those come from people who live outside of Salt Lake City. Not sure kind of what the source is on that number, but regardless, I think there is some truth to that a lot of Salt Lake County residents and outsiders pay Salt Lake City sales tax at some point. A majority of that $900 million goes to renovations of the Delta Center, about $500 million of it. The rest goes to building this stadium district just to the east of it on a block where the Salt Palace is now. I still think it is a bad move to give billionaires money, the tax money of regular citizens to do stadium construction and development projects. Frankly, Ryan Smith has enough money. He probably could have paid for it himself. And I think it's a not great thing that he did to put Salt Lake City in this bind of either having to pay the sales tax or lose the Jazz and the hockey club. That being said, I understand why the city council made the decision they did once they were in kind of that straitjacket.
So is it possible to be excited and also feel gross?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be kind of a good thing for the city, right? I do think the Salt Palace is kind of ugly and too big right now in a post-COVID world. It just does make sense to renovate that, but also, given that it made sense to renovate that, I think there were ways that, it could have been done without having to use Ryan Smith as the guy who's getting all the taxpayer money.
Well, and one more thing here, we'll end with some Jazz. Also, it's easy for us to talk about what to do with other people's money. But one thing that I think it's safe to say about Ryan is he likes to be liked. He wants to be famous. He likes famous friends. And can you imagine what sort of pedestal he would be on if he was just like, hey, I built a company that's worth $25 billion or whatever it is. Can you imagine what sort of pedestal Ryan Smith would actually be on if he's like, I got this. No public money. I'm going to foot, $4 or $5 billion right out of my pocket. Like he would walk on water around here. And it feels like that's something that's important to him.
Look, and, I think that's a little important to him. I think more important to him is being liked by a higher peer group, right? Like
Sure.
the Dwayne Wades and the Tony Finau's and the, Tim Apples of the world, if you will, right? But I do think, it does matter to him what Utah thinks of him, and I think he sees this as essentially a loss for Salt Lake City residents, but a win for everybody else, which allows him to kind of keep the standing with the people he cares about. I think you go back to what Larry Miller did with the Delta Center in 1991. He got the land for free, or leased the land for free from the city, but then built the Delta Center with his own money, and there wasn't that taxpayer, piece of that. And I think that would have been a better model to follow here. I mean, look, every sports economist ever knows that taxpayer, has found that taxpayer subsidies of these kind of stadium projects do not return tremendous financial gains back to the cities that invest in them. And so, as taxpayers, I think, we're getting a raw deal here, but as a sports fan, I'm glad to see the Jazz and hockey clubs stay in Salt Lake City downtown.
All right, moving over to the Jazz now with a few minutes we have left. Let's see. Will's media availability. What stood out most to you about the comments that he made? I listened to it. I watched it. And did you learn anything about what the approach will be this year with 7 players either in their first or second year, and then vets that are just kind of like vagabonds? It's an odd roster. Howard Beck wrote about it. Were you able to ascertain anything about what this is going to look like after listening to Will?
Yeah, look, I mean, he was extremely clear that the future development of the young guys is their number one priority. And, you know, I think that makes sense. And finally, it's kind of a direction. You know, he directly drew the comparison between this year and the last 2 years, which I think have been really kind of confusing for Jazz fans, right? Like, we saw them change tacks in the middle of the year at the deadline from going winning games to tanking. This year, it seems pretty clear that they're pretty much tanking from the get-go. You know, they don't want to use the word tanking. They can't admit to the NBA that they're going to lose games, they'd be fined, et cetera. But yeah, look, when you say you're focusing on the 7 young guys under the age of 23, that means you're tanking. Now that being said, like, they still want to play, and Colin Sexton's probably going to start, and we'll see who starts at the small forward position. And I think Jordan Clarkson's going to play some minutes. Like I don't know that they're going to give like Isaiah Collier Jordan Clarkson's minutes right away, and so there really still is some. There is some veterans here that kind of muck this up, but it's clear that like both Will Hardy and the organization believe that this is a development year, not a try to win 40 or 50 games here.
All right. So according to, and now that they fired Zach Lowe, which whatever, maybe I shouldn't use their website, but ESPN.com, starting 5, Keontae George, Colin Sexton, Larry Markkinen, Taylor Hendricks, John Collins. Agree or disagree?
I don't think they start Taylor. I think they go somewhere else with that small forward position, whether that's Bryce Sensabaugh or even just starting Cody Williams right away. I think they kind of learned from last year that you can't go with Lowry at the 3 and then kind of a questionable young front court at 4 and 5. I expect Walker to start at the 5. I think Lowry's starting at the 4, and then really you're kind of trying to figure out who that starting 3 is rather than – and maybe it is Taylor Hendricks, but I think his skill set right now, I think one of the things we learned about Taylor Hendricks at Summer League is that he can't dribble right now, and you need to do more of that at the 3 than you do at the 4. So, I think that's to me what I see. I don't think they think Taylor Hendricks is ready for starting minutes right away, but nevertheless, it absolutely could happen. At this point we're guessing, and Will was pretty clear. Like they're going to do some experimentation in preseason in these first couple of weeks to see what rotation things they like. And there are opportunities for guys to win starting battles for sure.
Who wins the third string small forward spots? V. Mikhailachuk or Johnny Juzang? Just kidding. Moving on from that. Final question for today, Andy. Of the first or second year players, okay, so there's 7 of them. You go whatever direction you want. Which of the 7 players do you feel like you know the most about, and which of the 7 players are you most excited to learn about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know the most about Keontae George because he played the most minutes last year, right? Like, that's the guy, that's not to say that he is who he is, but I kind of know what style of player he is, right? Like, he is a high-volume shooter in the realm of kind of a, he's obviously not as good as Jamal Murray, but right now kind of in that realm of someone who wants to put up a lot of points, clearly needs to make more of the shots, clearly needs to make better decisions, clearly needs to reduce the turnovers and, actually play some defense. But that's kind of the hope for what kind of player he is. And then you kind of see how good he is. For Taylor Hendricks and Bryce Sensabaugh, I still think like there are real questions whether or not they are or will become NBA players, period, right? Like they are just really pretty raw at this point. I think Bryce Sensabaugh, like worst case, maybe just finds a spot in the league as just like a knockdown shooter because I think he can do that, but he's kind of slow with his release. He obviously can't defend right now. Like he doesn't do a lot of other good stuff on the court, and so it may be hard for him to get an NBA spot. Taylor Hendricks, still so raw, still could go either way, right? And I love Taylor in that draft, and yet I have to acknowledge from what we saw in Summer League and what we saw last year, he's just so raw still. And then, the other 3 guys are rookies. We just don't know yet. I feel pretty confident in what Cody Williams is due to his feel, and, I think he's going to find some way onto a court, but there's such a huge range between whether he's just kind of like a floater out there who's a 10% usage guy, or if he really does kind of get some of his brother's aggression and really, can be a 20-25% usage guy and then be really efficient. I think that's a real, swing skill set for him. Isaiah Collier could obviously go either way. He's a high ceiling, low floor kind of prospect. And then Kyle Filipowski, it's just going to depend on whether or not he can shoot. I think he's got a lot of NBA skills. It's just like, if he can shoot, he's probably Kelly Olynyk. And if he can't shoot, he's probably what Frank Kaminsky turned out to be in the NBA and indeed out of the NBA. So we'll see what happens with all those guys.
All right, Andy, before I set you loose, it's preseason in the NBA, also known as I put on 20 pounds of muscle season. And we're hearing that from multiple players. You've seen them up close. How real is the whole, who is actually legitimately looking like they're stronger after the offseason?
Taylor Hendricks does look significantly bigger and actually looks older too, which, hey, the progress of time. But I do think he has changed his body in a significant way. I don't know if it's 20, I can't look at a guy and tell you if it's really 20 pounds or if it's 10 or 5 or what, but I do think he looks different. I think Bryce Sensabaugh looks significantly slimmer than he did. Honestly, coming out of college, he had some real baby fat stuff going on, and you could see he had his hands on his hips or bent over on after transition plays. He got tired during games in a way that you don't want to be tired as an NBA player. So to see him in better shape is good. Those are probably the two guys where I see the most difference. Other guys maybe, Lowry actually does look a little bit stronger. Kind of the belief there is maybe he'll thin down during the season, but I don't know that those, Taylor and Bryce are the two guys where I see the most difference or the most noticeable difference.
All right, buddy. Enjoy the game tonight. Pray for me. I'll be praying to the porcelain god. Let's go get 3. Thanks, Andy.
Good luck, sir.
Thank you, sir. Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune covers the Jazz, writes a data column. Get him on Twitter at Andy B. Larson is where you find him. All right, before we catch break, 5 o'clock hour, 1 hour of college football to take you home. Then it's time for some baseball wild card playoffs here on ESPN 700. Lots going on right now. We got football, hockey, tailgating, traveling, and if you're wanting to lose weight or get hydrated, you need a boost. Give yourself a head start and a little push with Fika Infusion and Wellness. We have a special ESPN 700 deal, and you should use this because it actually goes a long way. I've been in Fika a couple of different times. If you mention ESPN 700 or mention you heard it on my show, just say Spence sent me in, and you're going to get $100 off your first IV. That's valid at any Fika Infusion and Wellness location. Go in once a week, once a month, or once a day. So what I use them for, don't need to lose weight, not bragging, it's just not my thing. But I like to feel hydrated before I play golf. So go out on Friday, wake up on Saturday, feeling a little foggy. I go into Fika, I get an IV, I get a hydration IV, and I feel great. I go up and play golf. I've done that 5 or 6 times. Fika's products are FDA approved, including their weight loss supplement, semaglutide. It emits natural hormones that have been proven to help patients lose weight. You have access to medical experts daily. They can walk you through their weight loss journey schedule. Book a consultation today online or visit one of their locations, Mill Creek, Woods Cross, and Park City, and coming soon to American Fork. Go to www.fikainfusion.com. Fika is spelled F-I-K-A. And again, mention that you heard me tell you to go in, and you get $100 off your first IV. It's almost a free IV. Try it. It's great for hydration, great for vitamin shots. They're really nice people. It's a beautiful place at Fika Infusion and Wellness, our good friends. All right, speaking of good friends, Ryan from the Dish Bros, give him a call. 801-424-DISH. I have all the football I could ever want through 5 weeks of college, 4 weeks in the NFL. Save money, support local, and grab that DVR, which is massive. 801-424-DISH. What's up, Ryan?
Yes, get that DVR. I think that's the coolest thing that ever got invented for TV is having that capability to really control how you watch TV and having access everywhere, plus having a system that's smart, that knows what you want. If you lose your remote, it's got a remote locator. And, guys, it comes with a killer offer, great promotion. And this world we live in, you got to have access to streaming. That's just part of it if you want to watch all the sports. And the Dish system has made it so all the streaming apps can be uploaded into the Hopper ecosystem, and it'll work on all your TVs Amazon Video Prime, Netflix, they're all, YouTube. They're all like a channel on Dish. Super easy to use. Call us up and take advantage of this 2-year promotion. The price is going to stay the same for the next 2 years. Typically $60 to $100+ cheaper than what you're paying for cable or DirecTV. And guys, here's another thing. Dish and DirecTV, it's official. This merge is going to go through. But in the meantime, you can still activate as a new customer. So if you're unhappy with either one of those providers, we can help you take advantage of the new customer offer while it's still available. Save a whole bunch of money. We'll get you set up and installed, throw in dinner at JCW's. Remember, Dish still has those extra promotions with the NFL Red Zone, the multi-sports pack. Call us today and let us get you upgraded. 424-DISH is the number. Call now, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Bros. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. College football for the final hour to take you home right here on ESPN 700.
Right.
It's wild cards. I'm gonna allow myself to get excited about it, and if it is, it's even met. So, so there's wishing on too, but um, they love their play in a fashion, but it's hard for me not to get excited, not to get excited about regardless of how yes.
Mullet. Because the Bill Riley Mullet Watch on the college football side of things is now over. If the Mets win the World Series, I don't want to say mullet because I feel like you'd grow a mullet and rock it. I feel like
Right.
you'd enjoy that. And you already have the hipster mustache. Screw it. Will you grow a mullet if the Mets win the World Series?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
I would do unspeakable things
Will you get
for the
a
Mets to win a World
Will you
Series.
get a Donald Trump tattoo on your forehead?
No.
You said unspeakable things.
Mm.
Will you get a tattoo of the drive with Spence Checketts on your forearm?
Ooh, my forearm.
Yeah. Can be small.
We'll think about it. But I would do a lot of things for a Mets World Series. I think go back to when they lost to the Royals and, let's be clear, choked against the Royals.
Yes, they did.
That was I don't mean to make light of like actual mental health issues and,
Sure.
and stuff like that. I was not in a good space that week.
Yeah. No, that was a rough collapse for sure. So tonight we've got wild card baseball. We have RSL soccer. We have Utah Hockey Club preseason. So a busy night tonight. Pray for me. Gonna need it tonight. And then tomorrow I plan on doing the show. It might be loose. Colonoscopy in the AM, a little sports talk radio in the FM. So that's what your boy's going through tonight. So thoughts and prayers, please. All right, Porter, before I sprint home to handle my business, what comes our way on a Thursday show?
Yeah, man, on a Thursday, we'll cover all of our bases. Of course, Pablo Mastroeni. On the heels of an RSL match day, we'll have a big hour. Craig Bolerjack, Gordon Monson, they'll both be in studio talking college football, talking NBA, Utah Hockey Club, wherever you want to go with Bowler and Monson. A little bit of sports court action for you on a Thursday, and then checking in with our guy Kyle Bonagura, who's been real busy. And he was actually in Salt Lake over the weekend as well. So we give you a little recap of Arizona and Utah.
There you go. That'll be a good Thursday show. And I will be here. I will be present. I will be cleansed for sure and energetic. So enjoy your Wednesday evening. Special thank you today to Court McGee, Chris Comrani, Neil Smith, and Andy Larson. If you missed any of the sound from the show today, you can log on to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. It is the ESPN 700 app, and that's available in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do in our space, every afternoon for 4 hours, check out our podcast page. It is called The Drive with Spence Checketts, and that's available.
Famous, or you're working against the clock just to stay afloat. Got to sleep well.
The hardest part or subscribe, whatever they ask you to do. Then give us a rating and a review. If you give us all the stars and say nice things, it actually helps. We would appreciate it. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy a little Major League Baseball.
I'm a high step